Well, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, the console wars are over. They're no more. Xbox and PlayStation have spoken, and they've decided to forever hold their peace. I can see love in their eyes, and it's precious and it's sweet. And if you don't know what I'm talking about here, oh boy, today is going to be a hard day for, I'd say, the most rabid of rabid fanboys across the world, because it's not just Helldivers 2 that's coming to Xbox, and possibly Nintendo in the future. That seems very plausible as of this moment. There's actually more PlayStation-owned games that are heading over to Xbox and to Nintendo. This has been confirmed by Sony themselves, but first, we need to rewind here for a moment, because the lead up to this has been more than fascinating, and it's important to understand what's actually happening here. And we have to look all the way back to the year of 2020. This is the year that they really started to push for their multi-platform journey. They started to release their tentpole first-party PlayStation 4 games on PC. Games like Horizon Zero Dawn, and I remember the outcry very, very well. The flat-out denial. A lot of people swore up and down that this was going to be only for PlayStation 4 games, and that they would never, ever do the same thing for their PlayStation 5 exclusives. Yeah, that was quickly proven wrong, as more games like God of War Ragnarok and Spider-Man 2 made their way over to PC, because if you don't know how businesses work, it's not their most rabid fans that they listen to. What they really listen to is money. And if they can find more ways to make more money, then you can bet your bottom dollar that they're going to absolutely do it. It's easy to see that they like the money that they make from PC gaming. But that's not the end of their multi-platform journey. No. That was only just the beginning. It didn't take long before we started to hear whispers within Sony that they want to explore a more multi-platform future, and there's been a lot of speculation as to exactly what that meant. They spoke in vague terms, after all, so are they just talking about PC, maybe mobile gaming, or even cloud gaming? Admittedly, it's a little hard sometimes to read through PR statements, but slowly but surely we started to see that plan unfold. Last year, Sony did something a little bit unexpected. They released Horizon Legos on the Nintendo Switch, and a lot of people at the time were once again in denial, because, it's just a licensed game and nothing more. Legos probably wanted it to be on multiple platforms, much in the same way that MLB wanted MLB The Show to be on multiple platforms. And you know what? I have to agree with that. But at the same time, you have to admit, this is a very different stance for Sony. I mean, Sony, out of all companies, they've always been known to be a cutthroat, exclusive, first-party company. So even if it's just a licensed game and nothing more, it's certainly not something that you would expect coming from Sony. They actually went into that game with the mindset that they would release on Nintendo? And that's where things start to get real interesting, because Sony as a business is starting to see money flow in from these other platforms. And the thing is, it's not exactly hurting their console business. If you've been paying attention, the PlayStation 5 is still selling very well despite some of these decisions. But they still have a pretty major problem. Their games are just too expensive to make, and they take far too long to develop. They've only had 2 in-house developed games for 2024 and 2025, because they destroyed their first-party lineup this generation by focusing on live service titles, most of which have since been canceled. So frankly, Sony needs to find more ways to make more money, which leads me to their most blatant multi-platform push yet: the release of Patapon and Everybody's Golf on the Nintendo Switch. Both of these games are Sony-owned franchises that they chose to license out to Bandai Namco to bring them to more platforms. And just like Xbox's first 4 multi-platform games, Sony fans echoed the same exact sentiment. It's just a few games, no worries. But is that really true? We've already seen this story play out once. We've seen how it unfolds. And when they announced Patapon and Everybody's Golf, the first thing that immediately came to my mind was PlayStation's back catalog. Games like Jak and Daxter, Sly Cooper, Gravity Rush, Ape Escape, there's Puppeteer, and the list goes on and on and on. Don't all of those games just feel like perfect fits for Nintendo? It just feels like that's the future that we're heading into. And lo and behold, for all of the denial, for all of the naysayers and everybody that's going against this narrative, Sony themselves have confirmed their more multi-platform future through a job listing that they just posted online, and let's read it here. This is for a senior director for multi-platform and account management. It reads, reporting to the vice president, commercial management as senior director of multi-platform and account management, you will play a critical leadership role in shaping and executing the global commercial strategy for PlayStation Studio software titles across all digital platforms beyond PlayStation hardware, including Steam, Epic Games Store, Xbox, Nintendo, and mobile. This role is accountable for optimizing title profitability, ensuring cross-functional alignment, and leading a high-performing team focused on multi-platform expansion, mid-range commercial planning, and platform partner management. Now, I don't know how they can make it any more clear than that. Xbox and Nintendo are absolutely a part of their future multi-platform strategy, and people can continue to say, no, this is not happening. But oh, yes, it is absolutely happening. It's not a matter of if anymore. It's coming. The bigger question, I'd say, is what games are on the table. And there's still a lot of denial that single-player games might be included. And I do agree that live service games are the most obvious choice and will probably be the most immediate multi-platform plans. But the reason I preface today's topic is because it goes to show you that every step of the way, there has been denial that Sony would take the next step into multi-platform. In 2019, we didn't believe that they would release PC games, yet they did. And then in 2020, that goalpost moved once again. We didn't believe that they would release PlayStation 5 games on PC, yet it happened. And then in 2024, once again, the goalpost moved. We didn't believe that they would release non-licensed games on a Nintendo platform, yet it happened. So it's a slow rollout, but you can see the evolution of their multi-platform plans and how it's constantly changing. Maybe that's because they're making money and their consoles are still selling, but Sony, without a doubt, is changing before our very eyes, and it feels like it's really only a matter of time before we start to hear about a big, single-player, multi-platform Sony-developed game on Nintendo and Xbox. I'm not saying that all this is going to happen in 2025. I'm not saying that God of War Ragnarok is going to come to Xbox and Nintendo tomorrow. That's not what I'm saying here. I think their immediate main focus, for the moment, is live service games. Games like Helldivers and their upcoming, what is that game called? Fair Games. Nobody cares about that game, but, that's probably going to be multi-platform. But is there a chance that by, let's say, 2030, that they start to port some of their big single-player games as well? I mean, if anything else, it's becoming a lot harder to rule that out. And the first game that I'd say immediately comes to mind is Insomniac's Spider-Man. Even though it's a first-party developed game, that's technically a licensed game. There's always a lot of confusion about this, but yes, Sony owns the rights for Spider-Man movies. But that's as far as it goes. They don't own the IP, and that includes in gaming as well. And those games are very expensive to make, in part because of the license itself. A multi-platform release, I'd say for Spider-Man, actually makes a lot of sense. Now, outside of that, though, what about, let's say, Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart? That's a smaller game for them that feels like it would somewhat fit on a Nintendo console. What about Little Big Planet? They could do a remaster of the first 3 games, maybe even Sackboy as well, and put that over on Nintendo and maybe Xbox as well. That makes sense. Then there's Demon's Souls. There's a lot of Soulsborne fans really across every single platform by the drove. So could that happen? What about Shadow of the Colossus for the PlayStation 4? What about Gravity Rush? What about, you can just keep looking through their back catalog and, ask about this game or that game. So could that happen? I'm not saying that it will with 100% certainty, but we are getting to a point where that feels like a possibility. Now, that's not to say that there won't be exclusives in the future. From my perspective, Sony will continue to release their single-player first-party games as PlayStation exclusives, but we are moving into a world where they could maybe do staggered multi-platform games, or the more likely scenario, I would say, is that they could open up their back catalog of older titles. I mean, if you don't think that Sony wants to re-release The Last of Us one more time, I mean, you got another thing coming for you. They're ready to slap a new edition onto that game any chance that they can get, and they're probably discussing it as we speak. But in all seriousness, gaming is changing. I don't think that this is a myth anymore. For my long-term viewers, you probably understand what's up and why all of this is happening. This all stems from game budgets and how they've ballooned out of control. They take far too long to make, and these companies are having to make tough decisions that were once thought of as impossible. They need more customers than what their own user base can give them because their games are just so expensive to make. A few days back, Matt Piscatella said that multi-platform is the way to win the future. But I don't really think that these decisions come from just the mindset of winning. I think it's more about surviving. Because a lot of these companies have made decisions that, quite frankly, aren't sustainable. And that includes both Sony and Xbox. Their consoles are important to them because they make a lot of money from their subscriptions and from their third-party games sold on their platforms. But their games are just so expensive to make, and they need to find ways to justify those budgets. There's a reason that Nintendo is the only console maker that has yet to move over to other consoles, and that's because their budgets aren't quite as out of control. So, that's something to keep in mind here. But anyways, that's going to be it for this episode. I want to hear your all's opinions about this in the comments below. Do you believe that Sony will release some of their single-player games onto Xbox and Nintendo in the future with this newfound information? Or do you think it's just going to be strictly for live service titles? I don't believe that. I think at the very least, we're going to see some back catalog games. How far back are they going to go? We're going to see about all that. How big are these back catalog games? We're going to see about all of that. But I think that's going to become a reality, especially with the release of Patapon and Everybody's Golf. But until next time, make sure to subscribe, ring that bell, and peace out.